was hearing those, taxi driver in Jeddah.
Yeah.
That would be taking you to Jeddah Jadid. The new Jeddah, they would call it Jeddah Jadid.
Yeah. Okay, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. So, inshallah, we're going to just do some more practicing this week. I wanted to, if you look through the little handout here, inshallah, obviously I put in the reading from the next section, the next page in the Risala. But I also wanted to put in some more examples of reading and exploring about the passive present tense case. Because there will be some issues if you want to actually, we're talking about mafruda. So the mafruda of many new or introductory students to Arabic is they will assume that if you see a verb and it looks like it's in the present tense. So for instance, if you say, you saw this, they're going to assume that it is going to be right. They're going to assume this. They're going to assume that it's built upon fa'ala yaf'alu or something like this. So you see qaf, del, ra in the present tense in the mudari'. They will always assume, it must be yaqdiru. They will never think that perhaps it is what bunya ala fa'ala being maybe right yuqaddiru, or especially they will so they will assume these to be also all be ma'loom. They will always assume it to be present tense, right? But there will be many instances it will be yuqaddaru. And as we said, right, this would be the majhul. And so the issue is that they are all written like this. Right? They're all written like this, like bidun harakat, bidun tashtil, right? If they don't have the vowel markings and you just see it on the page, it's going to look like that. So, yaqdiru, yuqaddiru, and yuqaddaru without the tashkil, they all look the same, right? Now, in a real life scenario, you're not going to be just looking at one word on a page. Because, then students will say, well, that's not fair. If you just see this, how do you know what it is? Well, one, what kind of book are you reading that just has one word on the page? This is a very strange book. If that is the case, then yeah, you just take your best guess, right? But we said what? The sign, right? The sign of the majhul is that the subject will be implicit, meaning that the subject will not be directly mentioned. So, everything here is going to be contextual, right? So everything is going to be context, which in Arabic we write as what? Siyaq. Everything is going to be contextual that will give you a clue how it should be read. Now, just because you don't see the explicit subject in the actual, either in the jumla or the ibara, either in the sentence or in the phrase, doesn't mean that it automatically becomes majhul, that it automatically becomes passive. That's not true. So, there might be a verse in the Quran where Allah will say, هو الذي خلق السماوات والأرض. Right? هو الذي خلق السماوات والأرض. 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 هو الذي خ السماوات والأرض. In a sense, here's our verb خلق. Who is the fa'il? The fa'il is who? Huwa, him. Do you know exactly who he is? No, if you just read this by itself. But within the general context of the Quran, or perhaps Allah mentions himself in a couple of ayat before, and then as we said, the style or the usloob of the Quran, once you explicitly mention the subject one time, it is preferable to either mention it again in a kind of implicit way, without having to say Allah khalaqa, Allah khalaqa, Allah khalaqa over and over and over again. And so you can either refer to it to the implied, we call this damir, damir mustatir, right? The word mustatir comes from the root of satara. What is satara? What is satar? What does that mean?
Cover?
Yeah, to cover, right? Or to hide, to be hidden. So a damir mustatir is what? A hidden pronoun. So in the very inflection, right? If we take this morphological form of fa'ala and we put it on qaf, lam, kha, lam, and qaf, we get khalaqa. If you were to literally translate, khalaqa, what is the literal translation of khalaqa? No, the literal. He created, right? He created. Tamam. The verb, like the root, the jadar means to create. Where is the he? It's hidden within the conjugation in and of itself. So for instance, if I wrote sa'alat, technically, sala'atil ustadh, ustadha, sa'alatil ustadha. Sa'ala means what as a verb? Sa'ala means what? To ask. Great. What does this ta indicate?
Femininity.
Right, feminine, and most importantly, singular, and in its, of course, third person. So the third person feminine singular. So what this ta is hiding is here, right? So within the conjugations of verbs is a hidden pronoun. So khalaqa yakhluqu, right? In khalaqa and the past tense and in the present tense yakhluqu, right? There is a hidden pronoun. You do not have to say huwa khalaqa or huwa yakhluqu. You can, but you do not have to. Now, in a situation where Allah has already mentioned himself explicitly, Allah khalaqa samawati wal ard, and then huwa this and huwa that, and then comes back to Allah again. What is the significance of mentioning the subject explicitly again when it has already been mentioned? Tashdid, ta'kid, right? For emphasis. So unless you want to do emphasis, like mubalagha, like to, hyperbole, like something to really emphasize, then it's not necessary. So again, if you just have one word on a page, take your best shot, right? It is a guessing game. But 99.9% of all scenarios, words do not exist by themselves on a page. They exist in a context. So the context will help to guide you through, Is it going to be active, ma'loom, or is it going to be passive, majhul? And so we will look through some of the examples that we have. But first, let's just kind of warm up and let's each do a reading of our page, inshallah. Go back to, so this is going to be from the section Sifatul Wudu'i. 3, 4. So this is from the section Sifatul Wudu, but then starting from the وَمِن سُنَنِ الْوُضُوءِ. Who would like to start first?
ومن سنن الوضوء غسل اليدين قبل.
So you're right that it is al-wudu'i, right? But it is what? Ghaslul yadaini. But why? Why is that the case? So the first one, so in Arabic, we have generally in our sentence structure, we have something called mubtada, and the hint is the ba and the dal and the alif. Bada'a. What does bada'a mean? To begin. So the beginning, we have the mubtada, and then we have the khabar. The mubtada and the khabar is like, this is the subject and the predicate, right? Now, what is the function of the subject and what is the function of the predicate? The subject is what the sentence is about. What is the function of the khabar or the predicate? Think about literally in Arabic, what is khabar, right? Khabar is what? Like in everyday Arabic, like it's plural, like akhbar. What do you watch that's called the akhbar? The news. Because what does the news give you? Information, right? So it's going to function as like a sifa, right? The khabar will sort of function as a description or wasaf of mubtada, whatever the subject is. So in this case, we begin with وَمِن مِن حَرْجَار. So sunan fi halat jar. And then al-wudu'i is also going to be majroor, but why? Not because of the harf jar, but because it is what? So we have, right, so it is what? Wa min harf jar. But then sunan is going to be affected by this, but it is also the mudaf. And therefore, al-wudu is going to be mudaf ilayh. If we go back to our early lessons, right? The mudaf can be any potential state. It can be fi harf al-nasab, rafa' aw jar, right? It could be the subject, it could be the direct object, it can be in a state of possession. But the mudaf ilayh is always going to be majroor, always. So therefore, al-wudu'i is going to be majroor. But what are we told about wudu? It's going to tell us, give us some information. The khabar is going to be what? About washing. So the first, it's also going to be mudaf. Because what? Ghasal is going to be an ism, and al-yadain, the two hands, is another ism. So this we have idafa. Al-yadain. This is mudaf. It is the khabar of our statement here. So it's ghaslu al-yadaini. Okay. ومن سنن الوضوء غسل اليدين.
ومن سنن الوضوء غسل اليدين
قبل. قبل is what do we call قبل? What is قبل in Arabic? It's not a harf, it's ظرف. You're close. Harf and ظرف. ظرف are what we call like adverbs, right? So this one particular is ظرف زمان. We said there's two types of ظرف. ظرف مكان and ظرف زمان. An example of ظرف مكان or ظرف of a place is بعد. That's why and so the ظرف is going to be محل النصب. It's always going to be in the accusative. It's going to have the fatha. So قبل or بعد and so on and so on. Imama, like in front of, khalfa, behind. Though like amama, khalfa, ظرف مكان. But qabla, right, before, it almost sounds in English like before has the idea of like, well, maybe that could be like makan. But in Arabic, we would prefer to think of it really as zaman, like as temporally before, right? Because you're going to do this before that. So it's what qabla.
قبل دخولهما.
Okay, qabla, and then it's going to be almost like an idafa. So the vowel on dukhul is going to be a kasra. So qabla دخولهما دخولهما
في الإناء
في الإناء والمضمضة مضمضة. Right, مضمضة. So in Arabic we have the fi'l thulathi. We have words that have a 3-letter root, and then we have also ruba'i. We have those that have a 4-letter root. So like zalzala, waswasa, right? Sarsara, like, especially waswasa and zalzala, we're familiar with this. And they're usually verbs that are associated with something physical. Like, so zalzala is to shake back and forth, right? Not to shake one time, but the idea of back and forth. So zalzala. Likewise, waswasa, like even sounds kind of like whispering. And so madmada is to what?
Is it madmada or madmasa?
Unless there's a typo. Oh, madmada. Oh, okay, so that's a typo on my part. So it should be mim dad, ta'un marbuta. Yeah. So I might have. That's a typo on my part. So madmada is to rinse the mouth. Like, so when you go like, when you put your Listerine in your mouth and then you swish it around, this is madmada. So again, like it's a physical thing, right? والمضمضة والاستنشاق
والاستنشار
ثاء صح.
ومسح الضنين
مسح. So مسح is to like touch or to rub, right? Or to like masah is like to wipe. So mashu, so the scene is sakin. So mashu, right? Mashu.
al-adnayn.
So what is your ear in Arabic? Now, adhan is before prayer, but it is related, right? You have idhan. Idhan is what? Permission. What you've been told you can do. Bi-idhnillah, right? By Allah's permission, meaning like you heard, and so you know what to do, you know what not to do. So that's the idhan. The adhan is what you hear to call you to the prayer. The both of these, one of these is called the udhun. Udhun. But if you have two of them, you have what? Udhunan aw udhunain. Depending on one, if it's marfu', it's udhunan, udhunani. And if it's either a mansoob or majroor, it's going to be udhunaini. So the alif nun kasra or ya nun kasra, this is the muthanna, this is the dual. Right? So he mentions and he talks about what? Ghaslul yadaini. Right? So yad is hand. Two hands is yadan, yadani. But if they happen to be the object of action, or they are in a conjunction, they're majroor, then it becomes yadaini, right? Two. So it's the muthanna. وَمَسْحُ الْأُذُنَيْنِ
Sunnatin.
Sunnah. Right, sunnah. Right, because this is obviously, we're talking about fiqh, and from the istilahat, right, from the classification of different actions. And it begins, he says what? وَمِن سُنَنِ الْوُضُوءِ. So we're talking about the sunnahs of wudu. Now he says what? وَمَسْحُ الْأُذُنَيْنِ sunnatun, or sunnah. Right, so the wiping of the two ears is considered a sunnah. What? وَلَيْسَ وَاجِبًا. It's not something mandatory. وَبَاقِيهِ
وباقيه فريضة.
فريضة. نعم, فريضة. So وَبَاقِيهِ. What is... God, I cannot write today. So باقي. باقي. What is باقي? Yeah, the remainder. So he says what? He's going through like a laundry list. So he says what? قبل دخولهما يعني اليدين في الإناء. إناء is what? Like a vessel of some kind that you're going to use for wudu. He said before you do that, والمضمضة, and before swishing water around, والاستنشاق, right, before inhaling water in your nose, or before istinthar and expelling it. He said وَمَسْحُ الْأُذُنَيْنِ. He said that the wiping of the two ears, right, this is considered a sunnah. Everything else beside these things that are listed, وَبَاقِيهِ فَرِيضَةٌ. So everything else besides those are considered mandatory. These acts are considered sunnah. Right? وَمِن سُنَنِ الْوُضُوءِ. Right? So that's what he begins with. He begins by saying what? And from the sunnah of wudu. Tamam. وَمَنْ قَامَ. فَمَنْ قَامَ.
فمن قام إلى وضوء.
إلى وضوء, because it's right, nakira, it's right.
وضوء من نوم.
نوم.
أو غيره. أو غيره فقد قال
بعد. So قال هو فعل.
بعد.
Right, so قال فعل. بعض هو فاعل الفعل. Right? So the word بعض is going to be the subject of the verb قال. Aha. فقد قال بعض.
فقد قال بعض العلماء.
صحيح. يبدأ فعل مضارع.
يبدأ فيسمي
فيسمي الله Ha. فَيُسَمِّي. So, ثَمَّ سين ميم مشدودة وألف مكسورة. سمى. ما معنى سمى? Not سمع, but سمى. Yes, right, exactly. So the word ism is a noun that also means noun. But also it's a name, like ما اسمك, what is your name? ثم is going to be بني على فعل, right? So Sama means to name something, right? It means to give something a name. But it's going to be in mubni ala al-majhul. It's going to be built on the passive. Is named. Fa-summi or summiya Allah. Therefore, right, one is to say Allah's name. What do you really think he says here? Well, what does he really mean?
Bismillah.
Exactly, right. So instead of saying فَبَسْمَلَةَ, which you could also, to say the basmala, he's saying then you say Allah's name, يعني قولي بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أو بسم الله. So يبدأ فيسمي الله ولم
يره
صح؟
بعدهم
نعم.
من الأمور
من الأمر بالمعروف. Right. So here Amr, what is the meaning of Amr here? Is the meaning of Amr here like قل, like is it a command? Or does it mean like sha'n? Exactly, like a kind of an affair or an issue or and so من الأمر بالمعروف. So he's saying that فمن قام إلى الوضوء. So whoever, literally rises, but whoever goes to make wudu, and you were what? من نوع, you were asleep, أو غيره, or something kind of like that. فقد قال بعض العلماء. Some of the scholars have said يبدأ فيسمي الله, that you should begin by saying Bismillah. ولم يره. However, بعض العلماء, right? ولم يره بعضهم. However, some of the scholars do not see that as being a necessary or well-known commandment. Okay. تمام. وكون الإناء
على يمينه.
What? So you have what? اليمين والشمال. ما هو اليمين؟ اليمين والشمال. فكون الإناء على يمينه.
Okay. على يمينه.
أمكنوا له
في تناوله.
في تناوله, because في حرف جار, right? The word is تناول, but it's going to be majrur because of the حرف جار. So تناوله. ويبدأ فيغسل يديه, right? Because it's two hands. He's saying فيغسل يديه
قبل يدخليهما.
Now this one is not fair. So قبل and يدخلهما and يدخلهما. So the verb is يدخلوا, but it's going to be nasab at the end because of the end. So instead of يدخلوا, it's going to be يدخلا. But then he's talking about what? Al-yadain. He's talking about the two hands. So we have to use the damir of muthanna, which is huma. So, قبل أن يدخلهما.
قبل أن
يدخلهما.
يدخلهما.
So يدخلهما. Yeah, it's not fair. It's
يدخلهما.
تمام. في
إناء
ثلاثا. No, 3 times. فإن
كان قد
بال. What is bala? Bala is a verb. What is bawl? Right, so bawl is urine and bala is to urinate. So, فإن كان قد بال,
So if you urinated.
right, أو تغوط. Right, غائط is what? Feces. So if you either urinate or defecate,
غسل ذلك
منه. What is the ذلك referring to? The bowel and the غائط. Right. تمام. ثم توضأ. So notice you have تغوط and توضأ. This is a very common form, a wazn sarfi. This is a very common form in Arabic. This is the form of tafa'ala and yatafa'alu. So tafa'ala wa yatafa'alu. And therefore its masdar is going to be tafa'ul. Tafa'ul. So many things that we think of, like, okay, wudu or a ghusl, right? A ghusl, right? So you make a ghusl and you make wudu. But how do we think of those as a verb? So this particular tafa'ala, this particular conjugation is to have something like as a practice, like a process of something you do. So wudu is the infinitive. Wudu is like the conceptual thing. But you tawadda'a, yatawadda'u, right? That a person does wudu. When you want to put it in the verbal form, then it is tafa'ala. Likewise, to make a ghusl is taghassala, to be more specific. Now I said sometimes the ulama, they will say ghassala. Like here he says what? He says, وَإِنْ كَانَ قَدْ بَالَ أَوْ تَغَوَّطَ غَسَلَ ذَلِكَ مِنْهُ ثُمَّ تَوَضَّعَ. So if you have urinated or you have defecated, then you wash that from you first, ثُمَّ تَوَضَّعَ. Then one makes wudu. So this is how you will use this. Like for instance, ilm is what? Ilm is knowledge, right? But if you want to talk about learning, like to study, we think of the word Dirāsah, but also there is what? Ta'allama or ta'allum. Ta'allum is what? Like studying in general, right? The practice of studying. So you have Dirāsah, which is study as an infinitive, but as a noun, you can say ta'allama, right? Like ongoing or something in general. So, فإن كان قد بال أو تغوط غسل ذلك منه ثم توضأ. Then, once you have that removed from you, then you make wudu. ثم يدخل
يده في الإناء.
ثم يدخل يداه. Or يده. ثم يدخل يده في الإناء.
فيقضى الماء.
فيأخذ. So أخذ يأخذ.
يأخذ الماء.
نعم. Then he takes water. فيمضمض. So مضمض يمضمض.
فيمضمض
فاه ثلاثا من غرفة. هذه غرفة ولكن هذه غرفة. هذه غرفة. So غرفة is a handful, right? So there's a difference. There's غرفة and غرفة. I mean, if you're that strong, go ahead, take the whole room. غرفة واحدة. نعم. إن شاء أو ثلاثة غرفات. وإن استاك وأصبعه فحسن. Right? فحسن.
ثم يستنشق
بأنفه. أنف. Right? هذا هو الأنف. Your nose. Right.
من أنفه الماء.
وهو right. الماء, because it is what? It is it's the recipient of the action. Yes. No. ثم يستنشق بأنفه الماء ويستنثره ثلاثا. نعم. يجعل يده, because it's going to be the object of what he's making. So يجعل يده
على أنفه.
and على حرف جار. So على أنفه.
أنفه
كامتخاطه. نعم. So imtakhata is to blow your nose. So imtikhat is the masdar. It's the verbal noun. So it's like blowing, like you're blowing it, right? So he says, what you do is yaj'alu yadahu ala anfihi, right? You put your hand on your nose, right? Ka imtikhatihi, like you're blowing it. The ha at the end of kamtikhatihi, that ha goes back to the end, right? Like we said, we don't like to say in Arabic yaj'alu yadahu ala anfihi kamtikhati anfihi. Like we don't like to say things, like it's too repetitive. So instead of saying anf again, we refer to it through a pronoun. Anf is what? Mudhakkar. It's a masculine word, so we just refer to it through a masculine pronoun. وَيَجْزِئُهُ أَقَلُّ. So we have like akbar and akthar, right? Like bigger than, or asghar, smaller than. And then we have the noun, or we have the adjective like qalil. Qalil means a little bit, but less than, we have to say aqal, because there's two lambs in the root, and so we just make it what, mashduda. We put a shadda on it. So instead of saying aqlalu, we say aqallu.
أقل أقل من ثلاث
ثلاث
ثلاث في المضمضة
في مضمضة. نعم. والاستنشاق
وله
جمع. This is an ism, not a verb, right? وله جمع
ذلك في غرفة
واحدة. So واحد مذكر, واحدة مؤنث, right? And because غرفة is مؤنث, وكذلك we cannot say غرفة أو غرفة واحد. We have to say غرفة واحدة. It has to match, right? The gender has to match. والنهاية. The noon is what? Harf shamsi after the ta'rif. So والنهاية. أحسن. Right. أحسن. Right. Right. ثم يأخذ الماء. نعم.
يأخذ الماء.
نعم.
إن شاء
two hands.
بيديه.
صح. جميعا. نعم.
وإن شاء.
نعم. one hand.
يده.
بيده. نعم. So, right. So, yad, even though it doesn't have any obvious sign of being feminine, it is. So, the feminine of yamin is yumna. And the feminine of shimal is what? Shumla. So, bi yadihi al-yumna, the right hand. You can, that's another word, right? But if you're using it with yad by itself as one hand, then the thing that matches it has to also be feminine. So yamin and yumna. Yumna is the feminine, right?
يده يمنى.
Right. يده اليمنى.
فيجعله.
So جعل يجعل. جعل يجعل. And then we're just adding a pronoun at the end, يجعلُهُ, and we're beginning with the fa, right? The fa of sababiyya. So fa يجعلُهُ. فيج ساكن. فيجعلُه. Yeah, ayn, the ayn has a fatha and the lam has a dhamma. يجعلُه.
يجعله.
Not lahu, luhu. Yep.
يجعله. فيجعله في
two hands.
يديه.
نعم.
جميعا. ثم ينقله. ينقله إلى وجهه.
Or actually, thumma, I don't know, there might have been some weird typo I had here. So, thumma yunqiluhu.
ينقله. ينقله إلى وجهه.
So, wajh, ما هو الوجه? هذا هو الوجه, right? And then if I want to say his face, I say what? Wajhuhu. But if it is what? Before it is harf jar, here we have ila, it becomes what? Ila wajh?
He.
Yeah, ila wajhihi.
وجهه
Yuf, فيفرغه
فيفرغه عليه
غاسلا
غاسلا
له
له
من
من
أعلى.
من أعلى.
Right, so what will help is you have to look at the last letter. That's the pronoun. So subtract that pronoun, the ha there, and just look at what you would have. You would have the word jabha. Right? Because when you write it by itself, jabha or jabhatun. So that's our ta al-marbuta. But if we want to connect it, it goes from that to looking like a regular ta. So we have jabhatuhu, or in the case of majroor, jabhatihi. So a'ala jabhatihi.
جبهته.
No.
وهذه
وحده. حد. ما هو حد؟ حد. What is a حد? Yeah. Right. So he's saying of the wajh, he says وحده منابتي.
الشر الرئيس. Okay.
Right. So what is poetry in Arabic?
شعر.
شعر. Right. شعر. What is hair in Arabic? Sha'r. Right. So the manabit is what? The boundary or the area of, right, where it comes to the lines or your hairline, right? So he says what? Manabit, sha'r, your hairline. So he's saying what? The hadd of the wajh, the limit of the face, is up to your hairline. The manabit al-sha'r is your hairline. Sha'ri ra'sihi, particularly of the hair on the top of your head, of your ra's. Not, right, the lihya, the beard will be dealt with separate. Sha'ri ra'sihi. رأس. ما هو الرأس؟ نعم، هذا هو الرأس.
رأسه إلى
طرف ذقنه. So إلى طرف ذقنه. ودوري صح.
وجهه.
نعم. What's the dawr? What's a daw? What's a dawra?
Duration?
Well, yeah, do this motion again. What is this? It's a circle. So your face kind of is like a circle, right? It's an oval circle kind of shape. So the limit of that is what? The manabit, sha'r ra'sihi, right? The hairline of your head, ila tarafi, right? Going to what? The edge of the dhaqanihi, to the tarf. Tarf is what? The tip. What? Tarfi dhaqanihi, to the tip of the chin. Wa dawri wajhihi, and the entire area of your face. The circle of your face. Wa dawri wajhihi kullihi. All of it.
كله من حد.
من حد. Same word again. من حدي.
من حد الدم.
عظمي. Right, because of two. What is the عظمة or the عظم? So what is this? And what is this? Temple. Right. So how do you make it into, if you have عظم, how do you make it into plural? عظماني أو عظمين. Right. But when you want to make an idafa, you drop the noon and you just عظمي. Right. So من حد عظمي لحييه, or lih really should be actually لحييه. Right. So from the two temples, right, where your beard would be. Right. إلى
صداغه
إلى صدغيه. Right. So let me take that back. The adham is your jawbone. Right. So you have a jaw on both sides. So the adhmay is the two jawbones up to the sulm, which is your temple. Right. إلى صدغيه ويمر. So we said masaha, or mas is to wipe. Marra is to pass, or to pass over, right? To pass. Wa yumirru.
يديه
Naam.
على ما غار من
Dhahiri.
ظاهر أجفانه
Fanihi.
أجفانه وأسارير
Wa asariri.
وأسارير جبهته
That same word, jabhatihi.
جبهته وما تحت ما رنه
Marinihi.
مارنه
Naam. Min.
طهري
ظاهiri. Right. What is something as dhahir? The outward. Well, not appearance, but in this, like the outward, or something that is protruding, something that is visible, right? So, وَمِن ظَاهِرِ. Right. Right. So marin, so if you go back to the word where he talks about marin, right? So he says, وَمَا تَحْتَ مَارِنِهِ مِنْ ظَاهِرِ أَنْفِهِ. Marin. Marana means to be flexible. Right? Marana is a verb, means to be flexible. It's like marinara. It's the most flexible Italian sauce, right? So marin is also your cartilage, because your nose is somewhat flexible because of the cartilage in your nose or the cartilage in your ear. So cartilage is, in Arabic, is like flexible stuff. So we call this marin. So ma tahta marinihi. So what is tahta? What is underneath the cartilage of your nose? Min dhahiri anfihi. Right? From the outer part of your nose. Yaghsilu. Now what is he going to wash?
وجههم
Wajhahu. Right, wajhahu.
وجهه هكذا ثلاثا ينقل
الماء. صحيح. إليه. Good. All right. Time for you to suffer. There are some real tongue twisters in here. There are definitely some that are. So, ومن سنن الوضوء. We can just go back to the beginning. You can take a course through, and then we'll go over some of the vocab and then the rules.
So, from the beginning?
Yes.
ومن سنن الوضوء غسل اليدين
غسل
يدين قبل دخولهما
دخولي, because qabla is going to make the following word what? Majroor. So دخولهما
دخولهما في الإناء
نعم
والمضمضة
والمضمضة
والاستنشاق
نعم
والاستنثار ومسح الأذنين
نعم أذنين نعم
سنة وباقية فريضة.
صحيح. Okay.
فمن قام إلى
وضوء
وضوء من نوم أو غيره فقد قال بعض العلماء يبدأ فيسمي الله ولم يره بعضهم من الأمر بالمعروف.
نعم. وكون الإناء
على يمينه
أمكن so like أكبر أمكن
له في تناوله ويبدأ ويغسل يديه قبل يدخلهما في الإناء ثلاثا. فإن كان قد بال أو تغوط غسل ذلك منه ثم توضأ ثم يدخل يده في الإناء فيأخذ الماء فيمضض فاه ثلاثا من غرفة واحدة إن شاء أو ثلاث غرفات وإن استاك
بأصبعه فحسن. ثم يستنشق. Yeah, so you have this form استفعل. So استفعل, and that's for, of course, ماضٍ, and then يستفعل. So that's the verbal, and then of course the verbal noun will be istif'al. So istif'al. So that's how you conjugate things that are built on the form of istaf'ala. So you have istaf'ala, yastaf'ilu, and then istif'al. So yastanshiqu. Ma'a, because ma is what he's going to. What yastanshiqu?
يجعل يده على أنفه كانتقاطه ويجزئه أقل من ثلاث في المضمضة والاستنشاق وله جمع ذلك في غرفة واحدة والنهاية أحسن.
نعم.
ثم يأخذ الماء إن شاء بيديه جميعا.
بيديه with two hands. جميعا.
وإن شاء
بيده, now you talk about one hand.
بيده اليمنى.
نعم.
فيجعله بيديه جميعا ثم ينقله إلى وجهه فيفرغه عليه غاسلا له من على جبهته وحده منابت شعر رأسه إلى طرف ذقنه ودور وجهه
كله. It's gonna match.
من حد أذنه لحيه إلى صدغيه ويمر يديه على من ظاهر أجفانه وأصارير جبهته وما تحت مارنه من ظاهر
مارنه. تحت is also what? ظرف. but it's going to be ظرف مكان because what? Below. So فوق ظرف مكان, above, and تحت, below. These are ظرف. So it's going to be with the fatha, تحت, and then the following word will be what? مجرور. So تحت مارنه.
ما تحت مارنه من ظاهر أنفه يغسل وجهه هكذا ثلاثا ينقل الماء إليه.
تمام. Okay. So any questions about anything here in the reading or any of the vocabulary? Let me know if anything jumps out at you. But obviously, he's going over some of the characteristics of wudu and describing some of the particular actions like sniffing water and washing your mouth out and that. This is what makes it a little bit challenging, is because, of course, then we're going to be talking about like different body parts and whatnot that are a little bit obscure that we don't use in everyday language. So that's just a matter of either doing a little, Google Translate or, noting them. But they're useful. But that's what makes it a little bit challenging, because we probably are not accustomed to talking about the marin of the anf, like the cartilage in your nose and these kinds of things, right? So then the next section that I wanted us to look at was, again, going back to the importance of, as we said before, how can we learn or improve our ability to read without the vowel markings, the tashkil. Part of that is kind of, to use a sports analogy, you have to read the defense, right? You have to be able to look at the context and say, okay, well, what is going on here? So if we look at our first sentence here, we talked about, I believe that we talked about this in our Aqidah class. So if we look at the first sentence, if we just write this, there's a couple things here that will make this particular first starting word a little bit difficult. Some of this will definitely depend on some basic vocabulary words and being familiar with those. Okay, so we have a ya, an ayn, and a dal. Now, you might be tempted to try to read this as some type of present tense verb, assuming that there are no shadda. So you might say, ya'idu. This would presume that either the root is ya, ayn, and dal, or perhaps waw, ayn, and dal, where in the present tense conjugation, the waw becomes a ya, not unlike, for instance, wasala and wasafa. Wasala means to what? To connect. And wasafa means to what? Yep. So to describe, right. But then when you conjugate these to the present tense, what happens to the waw? It becomes a ya. So we get ya, and then our other two. So yasilu and yasifu. So you might say, oh, well, this is just wada'a, and therefore this is the same thing. Now, anybody know a word that has waw, ayn, and dal in it? Yeah, what is wa'ad? A promise. So you might say, oh, that's what it is. And so it is, right today, ya'idu. You might say, oh, okay. It is just following the same template. Okay, let's say that's what it is. He promises. Ya'idu. And then we have what? Alim, or actually in this case, alam. Right? It's not going to be alim. An alim is what? A scholar. But an alam is what? An alam is a world, right? Like, so Rabbul Alameen, right? Allah Ta'ala is the Lord of all the worlds. So one world is alam. So if we say that he, we're not quite sure who he is yet, but let's just pretend. He promises the world, so that means it's going to be the recipient of this act of promising. So it would be ya'idu alam al-insan ... He promises the world of humanity. He promises the world of people. In fact, let's just look at our sentence. يعد عالم الإنسان والحيوان والنبات والجماد والسماوات والأرض وغيرهما من عوالم دليلا على وجود الله. So the meaning would be, he, let's just presume it's Allah, promises the world of humans and animals and plants and inanimate objects and the heavens and the earth and everything in between them, and awamil, like worlds. This is an indication of the necessity of Allah. Does this make any sense? Does it make any sense for this initial act to be promising? And, it doesn't make any sense, right? So that this is ya'idu. Now, no. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, right, even if you were to just look up in the dictionary, you said, oh, it's wa'ada, ya'idu, but then when you plug it into the sentence, it's like, okay, he promises the world of human, like, this doesn't make any sense, really. Allah promises, not that Allah doesn't promise things, but just, again, so this is where you have to start a process of elimination. Now, in the beginning, this is kind of, a little bit cumbersome and a little bit, it is a little bit like being Sherlock Holmes. You have to kind of do some deduction by process. Okay, so the idea that it is wa'ada, okay, we've eliminated that. What is another possibility then? We can definitely agree that the ya, as we've mentioned before, this is what we call harf za'id. It's an added letter to it. We know that it's not part of the root. Okay, it's part of the conjugation of some present tense action. So if this is added, and we're confident that it is not a 3-letter root, like wa'ada, then what are the other possibilities that we are left with? The only other possibility is that this is actually a 2-letter root. Now, technically, it's always 3 letters, but it is going to be an ayn, a del, and a del. Right? It's going to be an ayn, and a del, and a del. And so, it gets conjugated. We still have our ya, we have our ayn, and we have our del with a shadda. That's how we deal with a doubled up letter. So now, let's just do an experiment. Let's say, okay, I'm going to get out Hansver, and I'm going to look up here. Ein, del, and del, or in this one, they don't double up. So I'm just going to look up Ein and del. And what does Sheikh Hansver say to us? Adda, right? Adda means what? Anybody know? Right? To count, right? But someone, and this is the interesting thing in Arabic. To count and to consider are a couple of possible explanations. So we would have actually adda and يعد. عد يعد. But this is only if it is going to be what? معلوم. Only if it's going to be active. And I know I'm kind of cheating because I know if you don't know, but I think we have gone through this before. What is it when we have 3 root letters? What is it that we have said if we want to put them in the present tense? We have some vowel here, but this middle letter, what is it that we are going to do? Right? So for instance, we have darasa, and then we have darasa, of what we get. Right? Yadrusu and yudarrisu. So what do we do with this ra to take it from active to passive? What is it that we change? No, not a kasra. We give it, he just was going to say it, we give it a fatha. So we get so we go from yudarrisu to yudarrasu. He teaches, it is taught. And yadrisu becomes yudrasu. He studies, it is studied. So, again, that might sound a little abstract. Let's put it in a simple sentence. Let's start with the first one. It is studied. If I can, again, right. So, yudrasu al-fiqhu al-malikiyu and, excuse my sidewise handwriting. Let's read that sentence, right? Yadrusu, active. Yudrasu, passive. How do we read this sentence? Okay. How would you then understand this? See, the difference is, if I say yadrusu, I got to know who's doing it. If I say yadrusu al-fiqha al-malikiyyah fil masjid, he studies Maliki fiqh in the masjid, I kind of need to know who he is. It's got to be mentioned somewhere else. If we just have that as a statement by itself, you're kind of left incomplete. Grammatically, it's correct, but in terms of meaning, you're like, well, I don't know who is studying, right? So, yadrusu al-fiqha al-malikiyyah. Also notice, if it were active, this would become, right, the ism maf'ul. This would become the direct object. So you would have to say, yadrusu al-fiqha al-malikiyyah fil masjid. He studies Maliki fiqh in the masjid. But as-su'al man huwa? The question is, who is he? We don't know. So another way to do that, of which it could be completely by itself and makes sense, and by not explicitly mentioning the fa'il, the subject, we can say what? Yudrasu al-fiqhu al-malikiyyu fil masjid. So what does it mean? Here's a hint.
Maliki fiqh is studied.
Yes, right? So in the active, you're going to kind of do a closer to word translation in English. يدرس الفقه المالكية في المسجد. He studies Maliki fiqh in the masjid. But once you go passive, actually this kind of in English comes first, and then this is going to come second, and then this will come third. So when you do your translation in your head or in the initial and you understand, how would you say it? Maliki fiqh is taught. Or no, in this case, not taught, but it's yadrusu yudrasu, is studied. Right? So is studied. So the is goes to this being what? Mudari. It's still mudari. It's still present tense. So is, it's going on right now. Yudrasu al-fiqhu al-malikiyu. It's still going on right now. But the action is described in a way that, I don't want to say it's complete, but just in English, it's going to be like either an ED or an IED type of ending, right? So, is studied. يدرس الفقه المالكي في المسجد. Maliki fiqh is studied in the masjid. Now, in a similar vein, let's go from yudarrisu to yudarrasu. Yudarrasu. So, yudarrasu. Right? So, yudarrasu al-fiqhu al-malikiyu fil masjid. So, darrasa means to teach. If I say yudarrisu al-fiqha al-malikiyya fil masjid, he teaches Maliki fiqh in the masjid. But we're still left with the same conundrum, the same problem. Who is he? We don't know. So either he would have to have been mentioned before, like Ustad Fulan, blah, 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 blah. Yudarrisu al-fiqh al-malikiyya fil masjid. Okay, now that's fine because he's been mentioned at least once before, and then fine, we can refer to him in that indirect way. But a statement by itself, or let's say you want to talk about an institution, you want to talk about the masjid and what goes on in the masjid in terms of like general activities, then you could say yudarrasu al-fiqhu al-malikiyyu fil masjid. Maliki fiqh is, what do you think we're going to say? What is studied or is taught? Because we're talking about what darrasa is taught. As we said, one of the most important things about the difference between the active and the passive is that when we shift to the passive, we put emphasis on what is being done and not who is doing it, right? So when we use this, right, yudrasu or yudarrasu, what we're saying is studying and teaching is the most important thing being mentioned. Who is doing the studying and who is doing the teaching is irrelevant, right? Or certainly not the most important thing. So if I wanted to just give descriptions of an institution or like a university or whatever, and I want to talk about what their curriculum is, I could refer to it through the passive, even in the present tense. So it's going on right now, but I'm not talking about any particular scholar or professor or any particular student, right? So that would be the difference. So now, going back to our sentence. Our sentence, we've determined, or I've determined for you. We've said adda ya'iddu is to consider. It doesn't count, but let's stick with consider, right? But now let's shift it to the passive from the active. So ya'iddu is going to become what?
Is considered.
Yeah. So we're going to do what? Yu'addu. Now what is our thing? What yu'addu? Alimul insan. Right? So yu'addu alimul insan wal hayawan what dalilan ala wujudillah. Right? The world of human beings and of plants and animals and inanimate objects and are considered, right? Are right now considered. That ED part that I spoke of, right? Are considered. Now the other part in this similar sentence here, after he goes on talking about this, right? فَهُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَهَا. Now going back to active, because Allah is the one that created it, وَأَحْدَثَهَا, and originated, وَمِنَ الْمُسْتَحِيلَ, and it is impossible, أَن تُخْلَقَ وَحْدَهَا, and it is impossible that it is originate it meaning what? All the human beings, the plants and the animals, the inanimate objects. It is impossible to be so an tukhla. So an tukhla. Normally it would be tukhlaqu. Right? Right? But here, of the an, it's going to be an tukhlaqa wahdaha. Impossible to be created by itself. Does that make sense? Right? So he's saying all those things. He said, وَمِنَ الْمُسْتَحِيلِ. This is a phrase, right? Meaning, and it is impossible. And تُخْلَقَ, right? All of those things, insan, hayawan, nabat, blah, 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 blah. All of those things. Allah is the one that what? هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَهَا وَأَحْدَثَهَا. So always referring to them through feminine. So instead of yukhlaqa, it's tukhlaqa. The ta is, right, has to be feminine. So instead of, it has to be tukhlaqa and not tukhlaqu because of the n. But it's still that lam, that middle root letter is now with a fatha and not a kasra. That is the indication that it is going to be. Now, if you didn't see that, how would you know? Well, he's talking about what? An undeclared and implicitly mentioned and impossibly existent creator. So it's not being mentioned who that potential creator would be, but what? Any other potential creator. So when you want to speak in a way that's like general, universal, you can use the passive voice. So أن تخلق وحدها. He continues وإذ إن كل صنعة لا بد لها من صانع. And so every single product, it is not possible that it does not also have a sani' or a creator or a craftsman. So every craft has a craftsman. وَدَلِيلُ حُدُوثِ هَذِّهِ الْعَوَالِمِ, right? And the proof that these worlds were brought temporally into existence, وَخَلْقِهَا, and relating to their creation, مَا يُوجَدُ فِيهَا مِنْ حَرَكَةٍ وَسُكُونٍ. So he says what? He says yujadu, not yujidu, but yujadu, not yujidu.
It is found.
Right, exactly. It is found, or it is not found, because ma is here is nafi. He's negating. ما يوجد فيها من حركة. Or I'm sorry, rather, here he's saying what? There's not nafi. He says, right? The proof for all of these is what? Ma yujadu fiha. What is found. So, ma yujadu fiha min haraka wa sukun. So, what is, because it's present tense, found. What is found. By what is found in them, such as motion and stillness. Min harakatin wa sukunin. Right? So that's an example of that. Then, continuing, وَمَا هِيَ يعني صفة القدم. And what is it? Meaning what? The attribute of pre-eternalness. من صفاته تعالى أيضا. From Allah Ta'ala's other attributes as well. وَصُمِّيَتْ صِفَةً سَلْبِيَّةً. They are called a negative attribute لِأَنَّهَا يُنْتَفَى بِهَا أَمْرٌ لَا يُلِيقُ بِاللَّهِ تَعَالَى. That the verb here is yuntafa. Nafa means to what? Negate. So are negated or are rejected. Again, always gonna, or very often have that ed ending in the English language. So he's saying that what? Why do we call Allah Ta'ala's attribute of al-qidam or being al-qadim? Why is this referred to as a negative attribute? Because it rejects things that are unbecoming to Allah Ta'ala. So it says, لِأَنَّهَا يُنْتَفَى بِهَا أَمْرٌ لَا يَلِيقُ بِاللَّهِ. So, are negated or are rejected. So that's why what? Yuntafa. And I have some notes. I think I put them in your copy too, right? So the root verb is nafa, right? And so intafa is the actual conjugation. So we have the root of nafa, but we have this particular wazn of in fa'ala. And in the yanfa'ilu. In this case, we have nafa, so it's going to be yantafi in the active, yantafi, and in the passive, yuntafa. That's how that is constructed. So, which means to negate or deny or exclude, right? So the present form would be what? As I said, yanfi and yantafi, to deny or to negate, or denies and negates. But in the passive, it is negated or it is excluded or it is denied, right? That's going to be how we can think of that. Then in the next one, وَقَدْ ثبت عقلا انحصار الموجودات في الاثنين. He says في القديم الذي لا بداية له كالله سبحانه تعالى، وفي الحادث الذي له بداية كباقي الوجودات التي لم توجد. So وجد means what?
He found.
Right. Yeah. So you have wajada and yajidu. He found, he finds. And then awjada jada, and you do. These are going to be, right, awjada, yujidu. This is the passive. Just like our example before, we want to make it passive. You do, by changing that kasra to the fatha. So it is what? It goes from he finds or he found to it is, because it's present tense, it is found. Right? It is found, or it is existent. So I gave a few other examples from the Quran. So for instance, from Surah An-Naba, يَوْمَ يُنْفَخُ فِي الصُّورِ فَتَأْتُونَ أَفْوَاجًا. يَوْمَ ظرف zaman. Right? Because of that fatha on yawm, right? Number one, it's nakira. When you want to have a dharf, it's always going to be a singular word. It doesn't have the alif and lam before it. It's singular. But it will not have tanween. Instead, it'll have one fatha at the end. So, yawma. On that day. Right? So, it's pointing to, right, some point, in this case, of times or in the future. So, on a day in the future, yunfakhu. Nafakha means what? Nafakha means to blow. As Allah Ta'ala says, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. We blew into Adam from our spirit. So nafakha means to blow. So we have yanfikhu, yunfakhu. Yanfikhu, he blows. But yunfakhu will, in this case, it is blown, or because of the yawma, meaning in the future, it will be blown. Right? Yunfakhu will be blown. So yawma yunfakhu fi sur, right? It will be blown on the day the trumpet will be blown. And then fatatuna, all of you will come, afwajan, you will all come in groups. So that's one example. And then another one that I gave, oh yes, at the very bottom. So what? وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِ آيَاتُنَا قَالَ أَسَاطِيرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. This is from Surah al-Mutaffifin. So إِذَا تُتْلَى, إِذَا, right, at that point in time, تُتْلَى. What is the root of تُتْلَى? تَلَى. تَلَى. Tala means to what? Recite. That's what we call it in the infinitive, tilawa, right? Recitation. So when you want to say yatli, he recites. Okay, then we have to know who he is, or he has to have been referred to before, and then that would be what? Ma'loom, that would be the active. But if we want to make it not about who is reciting, but the fact that it will be recited, or that in this case, right, إِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِ آيَاتُنَا. Whenever, right? Because again, a lot of times the passive is about speaking in very general ways. So it doesn't matter who we're talking about in general. And of course, there's exceptions to the rule. But the rule itself is that إِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِ آيَاتُنَا قَالَ أَسَاطِيرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. Right, so when our verses are recited, are present, recited, right? That's that part about the passive. إِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُنَا قَالَ أَسَاطِيرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. And then one more in the same surah, Surah al-Mutaffifin. ثم يقال هذا الذي كنتم به تكذبون. قال يقول. قال يقول. So we have قال, he said. يقول, he says. If he wanted to say ثم يقول هذا الذي كنتم به تكذبون, then it would be what? Then he says, this is what you used to deny. But then we need to know, well, who's saying it? It doesn't matter who is going to say this to this kind of person or this group of people. The most important thing is the action. What? The most important thing is it will be said. So as a consequence of their inada, of their stubbornness, and of their kufr, the people of kufr on that day, it would thumma yuqalu, it will be said. It will be meaning now, right? That's the yuqal, that's the mudari, and then said. It will be said. هذا الذي كنتم به تكذبون. This is what you denied. So we conjugate that in the Arabic. We go from qala, yaqulu, yuqalu, yuqalu. That's how you do that. And then one more. فَسَوْفَ يُحَاسَبُ حِسَابًا يَصِيرًا. This is from Surah al-Inshiqaq. And فَسَوْفَ. Now note this. You can negate, right? You can take a present tense verb and negate it. Like وَلَمْ يَكُنْ, and it is not. Is not, from negation. You can make it right now. You can say ثُمَّ يُقَالُ, and it is said. Then you can also make it future tense by saying things like sa or sawfa or through some other means. So the passive present tense can also be included, or it'll be lumped in with that, the idea of future tense, right? So ثُمَّ يُقَالُ هَذَا الَّذِي كُنْتُمْ تُكَذِّبُونَ. Now we can use فَسَوْفَ. فَسَوْفَ يُحَاسَبُ. The verb is حَاسَبَ يُحَاسِبُ. يُحَاسِبُ. حَاسَبَ يُحَاسِبُ. That's for the active, but the passive is right? That's going to be the passive. Always what? Changing that, that kasra, or that middle word, changing it to what? A fatha. So hasaba means to what? It means to account for, to reckon, to take account of. And so when it is put into the passive, it is what? Is called to account. فَسَوْفَ يُحَاسَبُ. He. In the future, he doesn't make an account. He doesn't take the reckoning himself. He is accounted for, or right, he is called to account. He will be reckoned with. So that's the passive voice. Another interesting one, and this comes from some inflections or differences in the qira'at of the Quran. And this demonstrates not only the validity in the differences of the different qira'at of the Quran, but how most of those qira'at, or all of them, will also have to be justified by grammar, right? So, if we take in the same verse, Surah al-Inshiqaq, Right. So in the reading that you are going to be accustomed with, yasla sa'iran. That's what you're going to be accustomed to, because you probably read in your mushaf, it's going to be what? According to Imam Asim and his student Hafs, rahimahullah. So the people, or rather Imam Asim is from the people of Kufa. But Who, right? And so this is going to be Imam Asim. But who was the Qari of Medina? No. Imam Nafi' rahimahullah. And so in Medina, they recited this not as وَيَصْلَى سَعِيرًا, but as a passive مبني للمجهول والمضارع مبني للمجهول و it's going to recite it as what? وَيُصَلَّى سَعِيرًا وَيُصَلَّى. So يَصْلَى, يُصَلَّى. Okay. What is the difference? Salah, not salah, and not salah as in like to pray, but the verb salah means to what? To burn, to roast. So, in the reading of Imam Asim, it's saying about what? The kafir in the hereafter, وَيَصْلَى سَعِيرًا. He burns. He burns with that S in a raging fire. So burns. But Salla means what?
Is burnt. Is burnt.
Well, Salla means to what? To burn something else. Right? So in the active, Salah means burns. He burns. The second, right, Bunya al-Fa'ala means to burn something else. But when we combine it with the passive, Yusalla, it means he is burned, parentheses, by someone else. Someone else is doing the burning. He is receiving the burning. Right? The meaning is altogether the same. Somebody is getting roasted in the fire because of the consequences. So we say, al-ma'na wahid, the meaning is one. But there's slight inflections. One is direct, he burns in a raging fire. وَيَصْلَى سَعِيرًا. And the other, وَيُصَلَّى سَعِيرًا. He is burned, and meaning that what? You ain't gonna burn yourself. Right? It means that you are subjected to the power of Allah Ta'ala and to His judgment, and you have no choice. Not to say that, not to say that you had a choice in this one, but this gives a slightly deeper, more subtle emphasis on you really ain't got no choice. And what is happening to you is a direct consequence of your actions, and therefore on that day, in congruence with the other attitude about generally the day of judgment, is that وَلَا يَمْلِكُ مِنْهُ خِطَابًا. Allah Ta'ala says what on the day of judgment, nobody will have even the ability to say jack, as we would say in English. Nobody can say on the day of judgment unless Allah Ta'ala gives the permission for them to speak, because at that point, it's over. Right, so the section in this surah begins what? وَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ وَرَاءَ ظَهْرِهِ. For the one that is given their book of deeds behind their back. So, but it's already a wrap. It's already over, and now the consequences just simply tumble downhill upon you or collapse upon you like an avalanche. The broad meaning is one. but there are some important inflections that come from this, right? And so I was just giving even an example in the qira'at that you will have, there might be a preference to use the passive voice, and that's where it would come from. And then I put in there something about, right, that according to the reading of Medina, and then the reading of the reading of Medina, the reading of Kufa. Okay, so the last part that we can read from really quick, I just wanted to give a couple of real world examples. We're going to just read these two. Rob, you can start from the first one. No, this is, we're going to now just go to like regular, normal, everyday language. ويبلغ طول السفينة
الحربية.
Right, al-Harbiyah. So harb is what? War. And then when we want to make something, have you heard of this? We call this a nisbah, right? So it's like, it means like relation, but we have a nisbah is like a relative adjective. So it means you take a regular noun and you're going to do this with it. Or if it's feminine, right, you're going to do that. So harb is war. Harbi as what? Well, apply it to, a warship, right. So as-safina al-Harbiyyah. So yes, وَيَبْلُغُ طُلُولُ السَّفِينَةِ الْحَرْبِيَّةِ. FFJ. Right, FFJ or G, FFG. If G. نحو 140 مترا. So 140 meters. So it's going to be what? 140 مترا.
140 مترا.
Or
40
مئة تسعة خمسون قدما. So 140 meters or 459 feet. I really don't like counting in Arabic. It's really مما يجعلها
أكبر
نعم
سفينة حربية
يتم تصنيعها. Right, so تم this is going to be the active. تم يتم. But just like how of عد يعد became يعد, if you want to make تم يتم passive, what do we get? So we had عد يعد يعد. Then we get تم يتم. Yes, يتم. Good. That's going to be the present tense passive. So he says what? أكبر سفينة حربية يتم تصنيعها في
Korea الشمالية.
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 Right. So the warship FGG is approximately or has reached, right? يبلغ. Balagha means to reach. That's why we say when a person reaches puberty, we call this what? Tabligh or mubalagha. Once you reach that age. So balagha means to kind of reach. So وَيَبْلَغُ طُول. طُول is what? When a person is height, right? So طُول يَبْلَغُ طُول السَّفِينَةِ الْحَرْبِيَّةِ. So the warship FGG has reached or is approximately what? 140 meters long, which makes it, he says, مِمَّا يَجْعَلُهَا, which makes it أَكْبَرَ سَفِينَةٍ حَرْبِيَّةٍ, the largest warship, يُتَمُّ, being تَصْنِيعُهَا, manufactured. Being manufactured, right? يتم تصنيعها في كورة الشمالية in North Korea. Okay. Sarbar, let's go with what? The next section.
أتلانتا الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية
نعم.
يقدر عدد الأشخاص الذين يعتقد أنهم محتجزون كرهان في غزة بين
150
وفقا لتقرير إسرائيل لدى الأمم المتحدة جلعة إردان.
Okay, so I gave you a hint by bolding it. So it's not يقدر, but it's going to be, or because it's also bolded because it's going to be the past tense. So we have what? قدر يقدر يقدر. And if we want to make that passive, it's going to be what? يقدر. Right. So يقدر. قدر means to what? Consider, believe, estimate, right? So it is estimated or it is believed. So يقدر عدد الأشخاص الذين يعتقدوا, right? So to what do you think the root? So we have اعتقد يعتقد, and then our passive is going to be يعتقد. But look closely at the root letters. So the ya and the ta are added to it. They're not part of the root. So if you take that away, what's another word that we're very familiar with that has those three root letters? Take away the ya and the ta. You're left with what? Ain, qaf, dal. Or what do we study every Saturday night? Okay, right. So what do we say aqidah is? Okay, but be more common word with it. A creed or beliefs. So to believe is also, we tend to think of to believe is to, huwa yu'minu billah, he believes in Allah. That is belief in one sense. Another form of belief is to hold a set of ideas, right? And so that is i'taqada, ya'taqidu, yu'taqadu. It is believed, right? So the sentence, he says what? That there, يقدر عدد الأشخاص. It is estimated that a number of individuals الذين يعتقد أنهم محتجزون. They are believed that they are محتجزون. محتجز. Muhtajiz. Okay. Have you ever hajiz? What is a hajiz?
Is it a reservation?
Let's see if I hajiz.
Roadblock?
Ah, very good. So now we're getting hajiz. So are you familiar with the verse in what is the verse? Now, of course, I'm blanking. Yes. There's the verse, for instance, at the beginning of Surah Al-Haqqa, or actually not at the beginning, but in the middle of Surah Al-Haqqa, فَمَا مِنْكُمْ مِنْ أَحَدٍ عَنْهُ حَاجِزِينَ. So Allah Ta'ala is talking about the Prophet ﷺ. If he had not delivered the message as he told him to, none of you could have been a hajiz for him. None of you would have been hajizin anhu. If the Prophet ﷺ had disobeyed Allah and not delivered the message as he could have, Allah Ta'ala is saying what? Even he would be subject to punishment, and none of you could have been hajizin anhu. None of you could have what? So go from roadblock to something. What does a roadblock do?
It's a barrier.
It puts a barrier. None of you could have shielded him. Right? Even if he, right, he would have suffered the consequences, and none of you could have shielded him from that. So it means to impede. Right? So they're saying that they believe, right, in this report here, it is estimated that a number of individuals who are believed to be muhtajaz, detained. Right. Ka-raha'in. Right? As raha'in, hostages. Fi ghazzata, not ghazzati, fi ghazzata, bayna mi'atin wa khamsina wafqan li safir إسرائيل لدى الأمم المتحدة جلعاد إردان or Gilad Erdan, whatever this Israeli ambassador's name is, right? So what? The number of people who are believed to be held as hostages in Gaza is estimated to be between 100 and, بين 100 و 150, to be 100 and 150 according to Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. So there's two examples in there. يُقَدَّرُ, it is estimated. Not he estimates. We don't know who he is. He's not mentioned who's doing the estimation. So rather, it is estimated. And then it is not يَعْتَقِدُ, he doesn't believe, because we don't know who is believing. But rather, it is believed. See the difference, right, between those? Okay.
I'm still dumbfounded at the cognitive Spanish that I just learned.
What's that?
Kahrain?
Ka-raha'in.
Raha'in.
Yeah, ka, like,
Yeah.
and then raha'in.
Raha'in. Yeah, that's from Spanish. Right.
Yeah. I think it's from rahina, and then raha'in is the plural. So that's, I gave you just like a couple of examples, you know. Was there anything else after that in your copy? Was there like a whole nother page? Okay, so yeah, I put that in there. And then I gave you the other one from Surah Al-Naml, right, where Allah says, أَفَمَنْ جَعَلَ الْأَرْضِ قِرَارًا وَجَعَلَ, right. So that's just another example. Hajizan, right? That Allah put this barrier between the two seas, between the one that is sweet and salty, and it is referred to as a hajiz, as a barrier. So hajiz is a barrier, but then muhtajaz, or right, is to be confined, right? To be confined. So just showing you the relation between the words and some of the inflections, that if you can get to either the root or even a word that you know, even if it has a slight change in its inflection, it will help kind of lead you to having a general understanding of what that word will mean, and then also help you to expand out your vocabulary. From one single root, you have these many inflections that can be used in figurative or literal way, different ways. Okay. Any questions? So, inshallah, we can go ahead and conclude, and then we'll pray the Dhuhr. But yeah, if you have any questions about the active, passive type stuff, let me know. If you think it would be helpful to have more examples, I can shoot those to you guys. Like I said, the main thing is the mafruza, the assumption that it is always, instead of yu'addu or even ya'iddu, it must be 3, root letters. So it could never be, 2 or the doubling of 1, and that it is always active. I think those are just common assumptions that we develop in our early stages of learning Arabic. And then as we progress in our reading and read more advanced ways of articulation, then we have to somewhat become skeptical again of looking at okay, I really, instead of becoming so myopic on this one word here, I need to actually zoom out a little bit so I can see the word in its context. It indeed might be, and if you want, maybe that would be helpful. Give some examples of some paragraphs or sentences where it's on one hand used in the active and then another way in the passive to kind of help guide you, right? And this just comes from, the more experience you have in reading, inshallah, it will help to improve that. وصلوات الله تعالى على النبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. وياك.